All right, you guys, McGregor fight week is upon us, UFC 329. I'm going to go over all of the fight picks. Actually, not all of the fight picks. I'm going to skip the early prelims because, let's be honest, the early prelims are full of a bunch of trash fighters, boring fighters, guys that haven't made it yet. I'm going to jump into the prelims, though, and go from all the prelims up to the main card. So, and by the way, there are a couple of early prelim names, like obviously Tracy Cortez, but she's not known for her fighting. She's known for her slightly above average looks and her ability to get around. Um, you know, Wang Kong. I don't. First of all, I don't watch women's MMA like that. It's boring unless your name is Amanda Nunes or possibly Shevchenko. Maybe I'll watch the occasional um, Rose Namajunas fight, but besides that, it's really few and far between. Women's fighting is a joke. I hate to say it, but it's true, and we all know it. There's a couple names on here though. Fareed Basharat. I don't even know if I'm saying his name right. I'm pretty sure I am, but I've seen a couple of his fights. He was actually supposed to fight Ethan Ewing, which actually probably would have made me cover the early prelims because Ewing's actually a very talented fighter, and that would have been a really good scrap. Basharat isn't super, flashy or like he doesn't have a super high ceiling, although he is, I believe, undefeated, which is kind of crazy. But he just kind of barely wins. But he is decent enough where that would have been a really good fight. But again, these are just a bunch of bums overall. Not everyone, like there's some decent guys, but overall it's shitty. So let's dive right into the the regular prelim card, starting with Luke Riley versus Kai Kamaka III. Not terribly interesting in my opinion. Kind of another boring fight. This guy Luke Riley is decent though. He is he's on Paddy Pimblett's team. He kind of reminds me of Pimblett in a lot of ways. Similar style, more of a stand-up guy. Has some decent power for that weight class. Had a decent knockout a couple of fights back. Do I have them up here? No, I don't even have them up there. Had a decent knockout a couple of fights back. Kai, so he's basically like, kind of like a Pimblett, similar to Pimblett, whereas Kai Kamaka is like a shitty Max Holloway. Very tough, very durable. I don't see Luke Riley getting the KO, although he does have a little bit of pop for that weight class. But I do see him getting a close but tough and very clear decision win over Kai Kamaka. Now, Kai does have a chance. He is scrappy, not super talented, but he is scrappy and decent overall, and he is pretty durable from what I can tell. And don't let the record fool you. 13-0 versus 18-7. It's a lot closer of a fight than you may think just based off the record. Luke Riley is decent. I don't think he's great, and I think he has beaten a lot of bums. So Kai could actually steal the fight. He's got like a lot of power, not necessarily knockout power, but like strength for that weight class. And it's possible that he out wrestles him and just kind of manhandles him. So we'll see. It's a decent scrap actually. It's not terribly interesting, but not terribly boring. I do think Luke Riley is going to win a decision though. Moving on, Cody Garbrandt versus Adrian Yanez. Garbrandt seemed like he was he seemed like he was on top of the world 10 years ago. Basically, like when McGregor was in his prime, is when Garbrandt was fighting guys like T.J. Dillashaw, beating up on Dominic Cruz, and he seemed like the next best thing at the bantamweight weight class. However, over the years, he's been exposed as having a very, very fragile glass chin and also not really being as good technically and overall as we thought he possibly was in the very beginning when he first broke onto the scene. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact he's been KO'd so many times. I think he's lost a lot of his, like, I understand like getting knocked out doesn't necessarily translate to losing skill, and it directly translates to your ability to be able to take punches over and over again. That's a real thing for sure. But I do have the theory that once you get knocked out, you sort of like, along the lines of like losing your confidence in the fight, you also lose the skills that you had before getting knocked out those number of times. Maybe because you're second guessing yourself, maybe because you're not confident in your shots, maybe because you're overthinking things. But it seems like over the years, guys who get repeatedly knocked out don't perform as well. And it's not just because their chin isn't as good. So I think that may be part of why Cody Garbrandt has sucked the past few years. And he has had, some wins here and there. He does get a win every so often against the bum. And he does obviously still have the power for that weight class in his hands. He's always had some decent pop. But Adrian Yanez is just better overall. He's a better boxer. He's more talented. He's more skilled. He doesn't have that wear and tear. He doesn't have that glass jaw. And it should be a pretty easy win for Yanez. He's actually a massive favorite. I didn't realize that. He's a massive favorite against Garbrandt. I thought it would be a little bit closer than that. But I do think Yanez is the clear favorite to win this fight. I think he's probably going to win. I think he's probably going to win a very clear decision, like a 30-27 decision, or possibly catch Garbrandt in the second or third round and KO him. But if I'm leaning towards anything, I'd say Yanez is probably going to get the decision. So that's my pick for that one. Gable Stevenson versus Alicia Ellison. There's really no footage on Ellison whatsoever. I tried to, look him up on YouTube, try to look around. There is a couple like highlights of him, just like here and there in his last fight where he got TKO'd. I think the exact thing's going to happen. So Gable Stevenson, if you haven't seen, there's a lot of footage, not a ton of footage, but a lot of footage on his 3 fights. You can get like most of those fights online if you look around. He's an absolute monster, total savage, and he's going to be the future of the division. I don't really see anybody stopping Gable Stevenson right now, unless you're Tom Aspinall, Cyril Gane, Josh Hokett, Volkov, and possibly somebody like Waldo or Acosta-Cortez, somebody like that. Waldo Cortez. Am I saying his name backwards? But Waldo, the giant Dominican heavyweight there. Outside of those 4 or 5 guys, and then of course, like somebody like a Francis Ngannou or John Jones if they ever came back into the UFC. But outside those 4 or 5 guys currently in the UFC fighting, I think he destroys everybody. I think he takes them down, double legs them, takes them down, slams them, gets on top of them, and finishes them quickly. Alicia Ellison got TKO'd by a pretty big heavyweight. I forget his name in the last fight. Some kind of no-name, but I believe he's on... whose team was he on? I believe he's on Izzy's team, Izzy Adesanya's team. But some big, like, 6'5" heavyweight. But he's a no-name. He's an up-and-coming guy, but he's still a no-name. But he got taken down, and then he just got grounded and pounded and KO'd, like, unconscious, KO'd. And I can just picture Gabe Stevenson plowing right, and all 3 of his fights so far, Gabe Stevenson, he's taking the guy down, smashed the shit out of the guy, ground and pounded him out in the first round. All 3 of his fights have been first round TKOs, and I just see him. Alicia is not going to be able to stop that. This guy is a gold medal Olympic wrestler. He's perhaps the greatest American wrestler of all time. He's one of, if not perhaps the greatest wrestler of all time. Like in any country, anywhere. If you're that big, 255 pounds, solid, and that quick and that skilled, there's very, very few people, there's maybe a handful of people that have ever lived on this planet that could beat this guy in grappling, in wrestling. And Alicia is just not that guy to stop that. He's only 235 pounds, which poses the question, like, how would Hokett do against Gabe Stevenson? And that's a video for another day. But Hokett is actually a very talented wrestler. He wrestled and was like a top 9, I think, in the same tournament, the NCAA tournament that Bo Nickel was in. He faced off against Nickel. He lost against Nickel. But it shows you the caliber of wrestler that he is. And typically those lighter weight classes are much more skilled than the higher weight classes in general. So even though Hokett's now a heavyweight, you could argue that he has a lot more skills, not than Gabe Stevenson, but a lot more skills than someone who is just an average like NCAA wrestler. Like Hokett is a legit NCAA wrestler at a lower weight class who now is fighting at a heavier weight class and has a lot of those lighter man skills that he's now, I believe, brought to the heavier weight class. So him versus Gabe Stevenson, and all he'd have to do against Stevenson, by the way, is stop the takedown, which is saying a lot. It's a lot to ask. But if you're a wrestler and you're prepared for it, it's a lot easier to stop it. Not to mention Gabe Stevenson has beaten everybody in the first round. These wrestlers, when they wrestle, are like, 2-minute matches, and then they take a break. I think it's 2 or 3 minutes that you get to that level, but it's only like 6 to 8 minutes total matches. You're talking about a heavyweight 25-minute title fight, presuming they fight for the title at some point down the road, maybe the next 2 years or so. That's 25 minutes of fighting, and that wears on you a lot more than just 2 minutes in Olympic wrestling. So Gabe Stevenson is going to be an absolute monster. He's going to be a problem for a lot of people, and he's going to beat most people. But if you're one of those top 3, 4, 5 guys, you got a good chance of still beating him while he's still new. So we'll see. But this guy, Alicia, is totally getting fucking smoked. I think he's getting TKO'd in the first round, ground and pound, KO'd, probably unconscious. And that bet, I mean, I'm not like a huge bettor. I'm not a big betting man. But that's actually to pick the round that Gabe Stevenson's going to win is actually pretty good odds, because the odds currently to have him winning is negative 2,500, which is insane. You're not going to win any money ever on those kind of odds. But if you pick the round for him to win, it's actually not that bad currently. So next up, going to the, is this the headliner of the prelims, right? No? Or is this the main card yet? Where does the main card start? I think, yeah, this has got to be the the prelim headliner. So Whitaker versus Krylov. This is a very interesting fight as well. Whitaker moving up, of course, to 205. Former 185 champion for a number of years. Beat some of the best. He's getting older now. You've seen some of his interviews lately. It seems like he's ready to retire within the next couple of years. Somebody even asked him if he's going to fight for like up to 5 years, and the answer was like a overwhelming no. Like he's ready to go very soon. Like not like now, but in the next year. I predict in the next 2 years. So very skilled, highly skilled, always been that way. He's short, 5'11". He was standing next to Max Holloway in one of the like photo shoots or whatever. He's like the exact height as Holloway, and Holloway's maybe 5'11". So I think Whitaker's actually 5'11", and Krylov is all of that, 6'3". He's a pretty big dude. And that's really the only thing. Like Krylov has power, obviously. He's a big dude. He gets some wins here and there. Let's see if I can pull him up a little bit. The minor. He gets some wins here or there. But he also gets fucking knocked out here or there too. So he's like, he's got the pop. He's beaten, guys like Gustafsson a few years ago, older Gustafsson. He's beaten guys like Ozdemir. He's beaten Ryan Spann, which, Spann sucks. Ovin St. Preux, mediocre to shitty fighter. He's had some decent wins. Johnny Walker's a decent win. And then he's had some pretty significant losses. I mean, he lost to shitty Paul Craig, but Paul Craig can throw up a triangle and get lucky on anybody on any given day. Dominic Reyes, like the more recent ones, Dominic Reyes KO'd him. Bogdan Guskov KO'd him. Of course, Matt Ankalaev had a dominant decision win over him a couple of years back. So he's a decent fighter. Like, he's not great, but he's not bad. And Whitaker's at the point where Whitaker is getting fucking old and like worn out, and he's losing to guys like Reina Dorita. Now, granted, that was a super, super close fight. It could have arguably gone either way, but Reina, I thought, did win the fight. And then he got absolutely destroyed by Khamzat, which again, that's Khamzat. Khamzat before Strickland came around and showed him what was what, and showed him how great America was fucking steamrolling everybody. So, I mean, those are two respectable losses, actually. And then, of course, just a couple years back, was Dricus du Plessis. So DDP, as we know, is basically champion. I mean, he beat the current champion twice, although arguably Strickland won that first fight. But, needless to say, DDP is championship level. It's like there really isn't many guys more talented at 185 than DDP. And so that's also a respectable loss, although he did pretty much get steamrolled in that one. But aside from the Khamzat and DDP steamrolling, I mean, he's fucking still pretty solid, you know? He has a good win over Costa. He's got a good win over Ikram I always screw up this name. Alaskarov, where he fucking KO'd him. That was an awesome KO. And Ikram was coming into that. Everybody thought he was going to like take over and start being the new 185 guy. He was a big hype, prospect. And he's still very talented. But Whitaker fucking knocked him out in the first round. That was a very solid knockout. But also his last win, and that was 2 years ago. So we got to keep that in mind as well. But I do think lighter man skill is going to come into play here. I think it's a very close fight, not because Krylov is like super talented or skilled. I think he's decently skilled, but I do think the size is going to come into play here, and I do think the power is going to kind of scare Whitaker off a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit. And I think he's going to catch Whitaker a bit, and maybe even. I think he's going to hurt him. I don't think he's going to like rock him, like really rock him where he's close to finishing him, but I do think he's going to hurt Whitaker a little bit. However, I do think Whitaker is going to use his lighter man skill and his more skill in general to pick and choose and pop Krylov and actually get a very close fight, but a very clear decision win. I think he's going to win 30-27, all 3 rounds. I think it's going to be a pretty entertaining fight, not like super entertaining, but I think it's going to be entertaining enough where it's like interesting to watch. And also like watching Whitaker and some of the the press and stuff leading up to the media days and stuff. He's a pretty solid dude. He's shorter for that weight class, but he is fucking pretty solid. Like he's very muscular, and I think he does have a little more pop at this weight class as opposed to 185 as well. And also, I think he has a little bit better of a chin. He looks a little more solid, too. He looks like he can take a punch a little bit better, which I think is going to come into play, and I think he's going to need that at this weight class. But I do see this being a very close fight. Again, not because the skill-wise, but I just think the size of this guy. Krylov is a very big dude, and he's decent enough. I think it's going to be close. And Whitaker, obviously, this isn't prime Whitaker. This is old Whitaker. I think it's going to be a close fight. I do think Whitaker wins 30-27, a decision win though. Next up, we have the first fight, I believe, of the first fight of the main card. Bobby Green versus Terrence McKinney. This is a very interesting and exciting fight. Bobby Green has just been on an absolute fucking tear lately. I'm going to minimize these real quick. He's been on an absolute tear. And he hasn't beaten anybody like spectacular. Obviously, Jeremy Stevens is an old, sort of washed up fighter. Zell Huber, not that great. Gibson Jr., I don't even fucking remember him, to be honest. I forget actually who that even is. But like the last couple of fights, Bobby King Green has looked phenomenal in. Like he's looked like a new man. He's looked like he found the fountain of youth. Who the fuck is Lance Gibson Jr.? Let's see who this dude is. Okay. I think I kind of remember that fight, but I don't actually remember. I don't remember watching the fight, but I do remember the decision. I remember like seeing the highlight of it or whatever when it came up. And yeah, I mean that guy's talented. He's an up and comer, 31, but he's 10-2. Somewhat of an up and coming guy in terms of being in the UFC. Like he's new to the UFC. So yeah, I think I do kind of remember that guy being. I believe he was favored to beat Bobby King Green. I believe he was a favorite. Let's just double check. No, Bobby Green was a favorite. Okay, never mind. I totally do not remember that, but I do remember the highlights of King Green winning that fight. But anyways, he's looked fucking. I don't know what happened to Bobby King Green. I don't know what he's been eating, what he's been drinking, but he looks like he's de-aged like 10 years. Okay, so normally when you're 41 or so or 39, you don't get better like over the last 2 years. But he has looked like he's gotten significantly better over the last 2 to 3 years. Whereas Terrence McKinney is basically just old, regular Terrence McKinney, T-Rex, average, middle of the pack, shitty T-Rex McKinney. Seems like a likable guy. He seems cool. but he's not a great fighter. He's very, very average. He'll get your win every now and then. He's explosive in the first couple of minutes. He's a very decent fighter, but he's really just a gatekeeper at this point. And he doesn't have any significant wins. He's never beaten anybody really good. He's beaten, like, Chris Duncan is okay, you know, but I'm sorry, he lost to Chris Duncan. Chris Duncan is okay, lost to him. Kyle Nelson, okay, like, that's a decent win. But again, that's Kyle Nelson. Like, he's not fucking that good. He's basically another average fighter. And that's really his best win, or one of his best wins. I'm trying to find if there's another better guy. But there's really not. You know, he's losing to guys like Chris Duncan, who, again, is decent. But the point is, he doesn't have any major wins. He hasn't beaten anybody good. Whereas you go to King Green, again, washed up Jeremy, not washed up, but older Jeremy Stephens. Jeremy Stephens looks pretty good in bare knuckle, actually. But old Jeremy Stephens, he beat him. Jim Miller, older Jim Miller, but Jim Miller was looking pretty good at the time. Beat him. Beat Tony Ferguson. Again, an older, washed-up Tony Ferguson, but still not completely done Tony Ferguson in 2023. He actually wasn't done by then. Ally Aquinta, that's a really good win. Not to say Ally Aquinta was great, but, you know, back then in 2021, Ally Aquinta around that time took Khabib to 5 rounds, if you guys forget. So at that time, that's actually a pretty good win. And the crazy thing is, not the crazy thing, but probably the more significant thing is that he's always looked competitive, even against some of the best guys in the division. Not to say he's taken these guys to, like, grueling fights or whatever, but he has looked like he belongs with some of the best guys in the division. And so the most important thing, though, is that Bobby King Green he's got hands still. He's still quick as hell. At 39 years old, he's still quick as hell. He's got hands. I think McKinney has a chance in the first couple minutes to maybe catch Green, but I think overall Bobby Green is just more talented. He's just more skilled on the feet, and they're both pretty much going to be stand-up guys for this fight, I believe. I don't think they're going to be shooting much in this one. And I do think Bobby Green is the more skilled, talented fighter, and I also think he's quicker. McKinney probably has a little more power, a little more pop in his shots. Actually, he definitely does. But I think he also gets tired. Like, he seems to gas out pretty quickly. Whereas Bobby Green actually is pretty good with his endurance. He's good with his stamina, and he can last. And this is only a 3-fight round anyways, but McKinney gasses out, like, after the first round, or within the first round in past fights. And I think Green will be solid through all 3 of them. And I can actually see Green... I think I could see him catching McKinney in, like, the 2nd to 3rd round and possibly KOing him. I wouldn't necessarily bet on the KO. Like, it's more likely that he gets a decision win, but I could see it happening. So if I had to pick and if I had to go with, like, a result, how it's going to end, I would say 30. I'd say McKinney might win the first round, and then Bobby Green wins the second too. So I might say 29-28 for Bobby King Green, decision win. But I could also see him maybe catching McKinney in the 2nd or 3rd round and KOing him as well. It's very, very possible. But again, my pick, if I had to, just go in percentage likelihoods, I'd say Bobby King Green by 2 rounds to 1, 29-28 decision win over McKinney. Loner Kavanagh versus Brandon Royval. This is another very close matchup. There's actually a lot of really close matchups on this card, which is pretty cool. It makes those fights a lot more interesting. Loner Kavanagh, super talented, very talented. He's got a lot of ability. He can do a lot of things. Brandon Royval, I put him in the same sort of boat as I put, like the guys like the Brandon Morenos of the world, who a couple of years ago, super, super talented, championship level, right at the top of the division. But over the last couple of years has really sort of fallen off. And I just don't think he's got, like, skill-wise, he's probably the same as Loner Kavanagh. But in terms of, obviously youth is in Kavanagh's favor, but also, like, drive and energy and grit and, like, determination, all those things. I feel like Kavanaugh has more of that. I feel like Royval isn't going to show up as hungry as Kavanaugh. I think Kavanaugh, especially since he got knocked out 2 fights ago, Charles Johnson, he got clipped. I mean, it happens to everybody. It did kind of like shatter his mystique a little bit, Kavanaugh's, but he came right back and then beat Brandon Moreno, pretty easily. So I do believe that Lohner's at this point in his career is the more hungry fighter, and I think it's going to show. I also think skill-wise they're probably similar, but I do think Kavanaugh has more potential to finish these fights than Brandon Royval does. I think he's got more pop for one. I think he's got more ability to end things, whereas I don't think Royval has that anymore. I mean, I could be wrong. It is a very close fight. I wonder what the odds are on this one. It is a very close fight, minus 220. It's very close. But I do like Kavanaugh slightly more, and I do pick him to win a 30. Yeah, I would say to win a 30-27 decision. I think he's going to win all 3 rounds and get a close fight, but again, a very clear decision win. Now this one next, Corey Sandhagen versus Mario Batista. This is one I went back and forth with a lot. And this one is probably the closest fight on the card. Forgetting the odds for a minute, I don't know exactly what the odds are on all of them, but this one is probably the closest. And the reason why is Sandhagen has fought better competition than Mario. I keep wanting to say Mario Batista. I don't know why the fuck I'm trying to say Mario. I think it's because he spells his last name Bautista instead of like Batista. But anyways, Sandhagen overall his resume is more impressive with the names on the resume. That said, Batista has less losses and has beaten more people in terms of like the last few years. He's been, if you look at just at the losses and stuff, that you look at the loss-win records, Batista has beaten everybody except for Umar, and he won that second round. I believe officially, like the officials, the shitty officials, which they always fuck things up, I believe they didn't give him that second round, but he won that second round against Umar, which is very, very impressive. He showed off his wrestling. He showed off his ability to get away, to strike. Very, very impressive fight against Umar. And that's really his only loss in like the past 5-6 years. I mean, that's fucking very impressive, especially for that weight class, which is a very competitive weight class. So Mario Batista is very, very, very talented. He's maybe a year or two younger than Sandhagen, so that's not really anything there. But Sandhagen has fought the higher competition. So Batista has the Umar in his resume. It doesn't drop off after the Umar fight, but it does. It drops off a little bit. It's just not like championship level. Whereas Sandhagen, like his last, let's say like maybe, I don't know, six out of his like 8 fights or so, his last 8 fights are all championship level guys. Every single one of them is championship level, except for maybe Rob Font and Sadong and Yadong. Yeah, I mean, everybody, he's faced champion after champion or contender after champion. Very, very impressive. And even some of the ones like the TJ Dillashaw one going back like 5 years, he beat Dillashaw. They gave Dillashaw that for super, super razor close fight, but in my opinion, he beat Dillashaw. He should have won that one. Peter Yan won. He won a couple of rounds, but lost that clearly. Umar, same thing. He won a couple of rounds, but lost that clearly. And then the Merab one as well. Won a couple of rounds, but lost that clearly. Now, these are the 3 of the best guys in the division. Literally the 3 best guys are like his only losses in the past 6 years or so. Super, super impressive. I genuinely think, I mean, this fight could go either way. This is like the definition of a coin flip 50-50 fight. I'm just leaning towards Sandhagen winning it, though, because he's a little more crafty. He's a little more talented on the feet. He can do a lot, not a lot more, but he can do a little bit more on the feet. He has more ways to strike and get Batista. I don't think he's going to finish Batista. But I do think he's going to win a very close 29-28 decision. I do think I just see him maybe getting two rounds and Batista getting one. I think it's going to be that close. It could very easily flip and be 29-28 in Batista's favor. But I do think Sandhagen is just a tiny, tiny touch more talented than Batista. And unless you're like a crazy grappler, like a Marab or Umar, you know, or unless your name is Peter Yan, who's arguably, you know, a current like top 5 pound for pound in the world, it's going to be very, very, very difficult to beat Sandhagen. He is that good. He is that good. The only thing I don't like is that I just heard that in some interview he just opened his own gym up and he's like kind of focusing on like the business side of things, whereas like Batista's just in the gym training all day long. I heard it on one of the shows. Sandhagen's could be a little distracted, like the business side of things and running the gym and this and that. But I still do think overall Sandhagen is just a touch better on the feet, and I think that's going to be the difference. I think Batista's a great grappler, a defensive grappler, and he's a pretty good grappler overall. But I don't think he's like an Umar or Merab where he's going to be relentlessly going after Sandhagen and taking him down. I think it's going to be a mix of stuff, but I think it's going to be mostly standing. And I think because it's mostly standing, I have to give Corey Sandhagen the slight, tiny bit edge. But so moving on, I think it's going to be a very close fought decision though for Sandhagen, and he is the slight favorite. Benoit Saint Denis versus Paddy Pimblett. This is an incredibly close fight. What does the odds say? Okay, so Paddy is the underdog, and believe it or not, I'm going with the underdog. I'm going with Paddy in this one. Super close fight. When this was first announced, I was very, very certain, not certain, but very keen on picking Benoit Saint Denis. I was thinking he's very strong, he's very fucking, you know, aggressive and like a bulldog, and you know, he basically does everything Paddy does, but more intensely. Like he grapples better. He's a better takedown guy than Paddy is. He has more power in his hands when he's striking. He is more like ferocious, especially in the first round. He just seems thicker, like a bigger, stronger dude. And so that was kind of what I was thinking. And then like I watched more video on it, and Paddy is impressive. I know he's not impressive in one way, but he is impressive in another way. And again, everybody keeps talking about this, and it's very true. The fact that he was able to go 5 rounds with Gaethje after Gaethje just beat the piss out of Ilya, arguably the number 1 pound for pound guy in the world up until that point, shows a lot of Paddy's heart, his toughness, and his chin. He's very durable. He doesn't quit. He keeps going out. He keeps fighting. And he got poked a couple of times in that fight with Gaethje. And I forget what the exact scorecard said, but I'm pretty sure he won 2 out of the 5 rounds. So it was 2-3. To go that close with Gaethje, who just beat the piss out of Ilya Topuria, says a lot about who you are. I think if it was Gaethje versus Benoit, I don't see Benoit lasting more than 3 rounds with Gaethje. Maybe he goes into the 4th round and gets stopped, but I just don't think he can do that. Of course, you know, he could always clip Gaethje. He can always clip Paddy. That's always a possibility. He throws heavy shots. He got heavy hands. But over and over again, I see Benoit in the tapes, and I see him being very sloppy. I see him throwing wild shots. I see him being very careless. And I also see him gassing out to an extent. He's super, super aggressive, and he's got like this unbelievable tank, and he's got this fucking steam engine. But then he just kind of gasses out in like the 2nd, 3rd round. And you could chalk it up to staph infection and maybe taking antibiotics like they've said in the past. With I believe they said that was with the Dustin Poirier fight and maybe one of the other ones. But I also I saw him get ragdolled by Moicano in that fight. And he's super tough, and he came back in that 2nd round. and did, okay. He had like an even round. I think he might have slightly edged out the round against Moicano in the second round. But that was in a 10-8 first round where Moicano took him down within the first like minute, 30 seconds maybe even, and just held Benoit down and beat the fucking piss out of him. To the point where when that second round came and it was the end of the round, his face was fucked up. It looked like Ilya's almost. It wasn't quite as bad as Ilya's, but it kind of looked like Ilya's. And he couldn't see out of his right eye, and that's why they stopped the fight, is because of the brutal beating he took from Moicano in the first round. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, what if Moicano did get Pimblett down, which he definitely could, would he be on top of him for 5 minutes or 4 minutes straight and beating the piss out of him? And the answer is, I don't think he would. I think Pimblett is just too tough. He's too slimy, like in a good way. Like he slimes out of positions. He's good like getting back on his feet when he needs to. He's good on his back as well. But he never really gets in positions where he's just getting like overwhelmed and brutalized. Even in the Gaethje fight, he took a lot of shots, but he also got poked in the eye a few times. If you remember, I believe one of them clearly in the second round, he got poked and then he got hit, and that's when he got poked and he got dropped from the poke in the eye. It wasn't even the shot to the face. And then Gaethje's on top of him for like a minute or two, but he's always like sliming his way out of things. He's getting back into position. He's fighting back. He's getting back to his feet. And it was a couple of close times in that fight with Gaethje, but it was never. He was never like overwhelmed. He never gave up on himself, and he was never like rocked to the point where it was like, oh, the ref could stop this in any second because it's over. Like there was never like any controversy with that. He's got an incredible chin. The Scousers don't get knocked out. That could be a real thing. He's got an incredible chin. Gaethje hit him with a hell of a ton of shots, and Gaethje's put down a lot of other men with a lot of those shots. And one of those guys I think he would put down if he hit with those shots is Benoit Saint-Denis. So I do think this is going to be a close fight. I think it is like a very close fight, and Benoit very well could take it. But I do like Paddy winning this overall. I think he's got a better chance to win it. I'm going to go with Paddy. And I'm actually going to go with a third round stoppage. I think he's going to get him, could be late second, but I think he's going to get him with like a mid third round submission, like a rear naked choke after getting him on the ground, maybe piecing him up, maybe dropping him. But by then I see Benoit gassing out in the second to third round, and I see Paddy taking full advantage of that, and I see him choking him out at some point. So I'm going to predict third round rear naked choke or some type of submission like that. So I do think Paddy's going to win. I do think it's a very tough fight though for Paddy. Main event. This is an incredible main event. This is what we've all been waiting for. This is what we show up. This is what we love the sport for. This is what the UFC is all about. And for a lot of you people watching, this is what brought you guys into the sport. Now I was in the sport long before McGregor came around. I loved the sport. I've always loved it. I was in, watching this stuff back in the Fedor days, back in the Chuck Liddell days, back in the Bas Rutten days. I've been around for a long time watching this shit. But when McGregor came around, immediately, I think just like a lot of people, we all just fell in love with this amazing Irish character. And it was just like this fucking thing we've never seen. He was literally the 21st century version of Muhammad Ali. And in my opinion, even cooler and smarter and clever and wittier than Ali. And arguably even more talented than Ali in a lot of ways. In the last few years, for anyone who came on later and just saw McGregor the last couple of years, you don't know what we're talking about. The guys who've been around when McGregor was in his prime, but prime McGregor was just on a whole different level. It was just like watching. It's hard to describe. It was almost like watching magic before your very eyes. Like this guy said what he was gonna do, and he went out and just fucking did it. He said he was going to KO Aldo in the first round. He went out, KO'd him in the first 10 seconds. He said he was going to run through Eddie Alvarez, ran right through him and KO'd him in the second round. He said he was going to do all these incredible things, and he just went out and did it. He spoke all these things into existence. He had the most confidence you've ever seen anybody ever have. The guy was just fucking unbelievable, impressive, and he just motivated you. He inspired you. When you see somebody working and performing at such an elite level, it inspires something incredible out of you. And that's what he did to so many people, so many of us fans. He inspired us to want to be great as well. And that's why we loved him. But here's the thing. As much as I say all that, I say this because I want McGregor to win. I'm not going to hide that at all. I love the guy. I think he's incredible. despite all his flaws, and he's a human being, and he's got many, many flaws, and he's done a lot of crazy shit, and a lot of bad things. He's got court cases and fights outside of the cage, and different charges, and of course doing things, blowing things up his nose, and just doing wild shit. He's a wild man, and that's why we love him too, by the way. But he's a wild man. But 5 years out of the octagon, and in the last time you were in the octagon, you shattered your leg, and you were losing, starting to lose, not by a huge amount, but you were starting to get pieced up by Dustin Poirier, and it was really starting to look again like not the first fight, but the fight right before that with Poirier, which was actually their second fight, where Poirier really started piecing you up and KO'd you. And it wasn't quite that level, but it was starting to look very similar to that second fight. And then all of a sudden you shattered your leg. Horrible, tragic, very sad. But it's been 5 years of partying, of chaos, of arrests, of cases, of all kinds of crazy shit, businesses and millions of dollars, and just focusing on other things rather than focusing on fighting and your health. And it's great that the past year or 6 months that you've found God, and you've gotten back into family and gotten back into focusing on your health and training again. But looking at someone like Max Holloway, who's taken this 100% seriously the last 15 years of his career, and including the last 5, and fought nothing but the top guys, he just is in the rhythm. He's performing at an elite level. McGregor's basically just coming off the street, coming off the couch a few months ago, and trying to hop into this and perform at that elite level, and it just doesn't happen. It doesn't work that way. And not to mention, even aside from all those things, even aside from the 5-year layoff, and aside from the the hardcore powders going up your nose, and parties that you've been attending, and all these crazy things, habits you've been doing, aside from all those things alone, just looking at how Max has evolved in the past 10 years since their first fight compared to how McGregor has evolved. McGregor peaked a couple of years after their fight, and his peak was like Eddie Alvarez, Aldo Alvarez era, right around that time. And then after that, it was like Nate Diaz 2, I believe it was like Nate Diaz. I guess he fought Diaz within the Eddie Alvarez era, so you could say that was actually still peak McGregor, which doesn't really look great because he gassed out in that first fight, and then he looked very, human in the second fight. He did win the second fight, but it wasn't like an overwhelmingly one-sided performance. It wasn't dominant. But anyways, McGregor peaked around that time. Holloway just kept going steadily, not like to the moon, skyrocket, but steadily improving, every year, and fighting guys like Volkanovski, fighting all the top 145ers and beating the piss out of them. The Calvin Kattar fight comes to mind. Fighting some of the 155, and then of course the Gaethje fight where he beat the piss out of Gaethje for 5 rounds, and then not even TKO'd, KO'd him with one of the best KOs of all time in the last minute of that fight, the last 5 seconds of the fight. UFC 300 it was, right? So he's just fought the who's who. He's lost a couple of them, like guys like Charles Oliveira, who wanted to just, crotch sniff him for 5 rounds, did beat him. But like on most of the fights, when he's fighting these elite level, number 1 pound for pound type of guys, he's winning a lot of these fights, Or if he's not winning, he's super, super competitive. Even the Volkanovski fights, all those fights are super competitive. So that's the level he's been performing at for years and years and years, and he's never taken, an extended period of time off. McGregor has taken all this time off, and he hasn't been active, and he hasn't been training, and he hasn't been taking care of his own health. And the other thing is, too, here's a quick few other things that I don't like about this fight for McGregor coming back in. So the number one thing is the styles. When they were younger and Max wasn't refined and Conor was at his peak pretty much, it didn't really matter. But their styles are different now, and Max is at his peak still, and Conor isn't at his peak anymore. He's just not. He wasn't at his peak 5 years ago, and you don't take 5 years off and then come back and then suddenly just like revert back to being in your peak. It just doesn't work that way, sadly. But Max's style is one of pressure, It's one of durability. It's one of relentlessness. It's one of volume. It's all of these things, especially the durability and the stamina. It's all these things that McGregor never had. And even in his peak never had, and to this day right now doesn't have. So that's number one, is the stamina is the biggest thing that stands out. Max Holloway can easily go 5 rounds. He could probably easily go 10 rounds, to be honest. He just doesn't slow down. McGregor can go like 1 to 2 rounds. If this was a 3-round fight, I probably would pick McGregor. Or I would very, very much consider it. I'd very much consider picking McGregor. And he even tried to make it 3 rounds because he even knows, I think, inside that this 5-round thing is a killer for him. He's just not good in 5-round fights. And so that's the thing. This is a 5-round fight. That's the number one thing. It heavily favors Holloway big time. That's number one. Number two is all the partying, the 5 years off, the ring rust. All that stuff is a major factor. You just can't overlook that. Especially, that's number two. Number three is the age, which I was about to say is, along with number two. But number three is the age. McGregor is getting old. He's like 38, maybe even 39 years old. He's getting old. I think he's 38. Holloway's not young, but he's not old yet. He's like 33, 34. I think he's 3 years younger. He might be 34. I do have it up, actually. $34. So Max is still 34. McGregor's 37. He's turning 38 in like fucking 5 days. So he's 38 years old for all intents and purposes. Max Holloway is 34. 38 years old, you're not in your prime anymore. You're slowing down. Your reflexes are slowing down. Your speed's slowing down. Your chin's going down. All these things. Holloway is not in his prime yet. I mean, still, arguably, although he's just barely out of it. Like, he's basically still there. So that's the other point. And furthermore, McGregor has these veneers. And I've looked this up, and I can't say for sure, like 100%. But I did a deep dive into it. I've heard some different things, read some articles and stuff. Veneers are not good for your chin when it comes to taking a punch. They just mess with the jaw structure and how you can take a punch, how you're holding it, the bones and stuff in your jaw. It changes like the structure and the way they sit on the jaw. And when you get punched, like how everything sort of like is supposed to be strong and stable and intact. When you have these veneers, it changes the structure and the way like your jaw like closes and can be like a solid uniform thing. So if it's like even a little microscopically loose compared to being solidly tight, if it's a little bit loose and you're taking those punches, you have a higher chance of a number one, breaking your jaw, and number two, getting rocked more because your jaw is not in place. It's not as sturdy as it would be. So that's the other thing. The veneer thing, I don't like the fact that he's got veneers now. Other guys like Dustin Poirier as well. I don't think these guys knew that potentially it can mess with your ability to take a shot before they got them. I just wish he didn't have them. I don't think it's the end of the world, but I do think it's one more thing that adds to this. The other thing as well is I believe he had a hair transplant. This has been reported. I could be wrong on this, but I'm like 90% sure, 95% sure that I saw some like reports of him getting a hair transplant just a couple of months ago, and like the hair was like just starting to grow in a couple of months ago, which means if that was the case, you have to take a period of time off after you get the transplant because it's a major surgery. And if that's the case, he got the transplant either just before he started training camp or in the middle, like early of part of his like training camp. And if that's the case, I'm telling you, like, it's not a good idea to be doing major surgery if you're training for this. It swells up your head. It swells up, like, the area around your hair and the sides and stuff. They pluck the hair from the back of the head. They put it to the front. Swells up the back of the head. He wasn't in serious training for at least several weeks while he got that. And even afterwards, it's, like, very tender on your head. And that's just not a good thing. And even, like, now, like, I don't think it's, like, today it's going to affect him to take a shot. But if that's affecting him in some way throughout his training camp, That's messing up his training camp. It's messing up his timing. It's messing up his ability to go full contact. It's messing up his ability to take shots. So he's backing off. He's taking it easy. He's not having a full-on training camp like Max Holloway is having a full-on training camp. And I think that plays a factor. That's something nobody else has talked about. But when I saw that, I just thought in my head, it's not a good idea to be having major surgery. And I know it's not like, the end of the world surgery, or major surgery like it was on his leg, but it's still a major surgery. It's not a good idea to have major surgery when you're going up against Max Holloway, and it's either the beginning or middle of your training camp. I have to say that. So to me, there's like at least 4 to 5 major reasons why Max is going to win this fight. And again, I hope Conor wins. I hope that I'm wrong with this. And there's still a good chance, that he could pull it off. I just don't see it. And by the way, here's the last one. I forgot to actually mention this one. The fact that Conor just doesn't quite seem the same as he did before, in his prime especially. With his trash talk, with his confidence, with his swagger, with his ability to come in and seeming to be hungry. He just doesn't seem to be as hungry as he was years ago. He doesn't seem to be getting after it as much. He almost seems to be in his interviews, although there's glimpses of, confidence, there's glimpses of the old Conor. It seems like he's almost hedging his bets. Almost like he's saying, unconsciously, not putting himself out there as much, because he subtly, unconsciously knows, I don't want to make a fool of myself. He doesn't want to, have another Poirier moment where he got knocked out unconscious. Or another Poirier, the third fight where he shattered his leg and was laying in the ring helplessly. It almost seems to me like he's timid, and not like a typically timid way, but a Conor McGregor timid way. He's just a little hesitant on the things that he's saying. He's not as confident. He's not as, dialed into, destroying this guy in front of him. He's just a little more like hedging. He's hedging his bets a little bit more, because I think he knows in the back of his mind that there is a good chance that he's going to lose. Conor McGregor in his prime had no doubt he was going to win. Zero doubt that he was going to win. And that was a big part of his mystique. And he was so confident that I think he was able to convince his opponent oftentimes that his opponent was going to lose, and it got into their heads. All the trash talk and all this and that, things that he would say, also got into their heads. But I genuinely think that a major part of it all was his confidence, and just instilling that confidence into his opponent was enough to get them second guessing, and then have him on top of his game while they were on the bottom of their game. And that's what often led to their defeat. So for this fight, though, I do predict Max Holloway win. I think Conor's going to gas out in the second, maybe third round. I think he's going to slow down at the end of the first, slow down in the second for sure. He might last past the second and get TKO'd in the third round or after the third round. I don't think this is going to go past 3 rounds. I do see a TKO either after the round ends and he just doesn't come up from the stool and that's it, or he crashes out, gasses out in the middle of probably the end of the second round or early third round. Sadly, and I think Max is either going to TKO him, or he could even throw up the submission and just guillotine him and tap him out like a Nate Diaz type of moment. Nate Diaz one fight. Very sad though. I genuinely hope I'm wrong. I hope McGregor catches him in the first round and puts his lights out. I'll be the happiest guy in the world if that happens, believe it or not. But I do think Max is going to take this one. So my official prediction is, we'll say Max by most likely chances. We'll say Max by third round TKO, middle of the round. Yeah, we'll say third round TKO, middle of the round. Although I could definitely see that submission going up. But Max got heavier hands at a heavier weight class. Yeah, we'll say I think he might Poirier him. I think it's more likely that he Poiriers him, Poirier 2, than he Diaz's him, Diaz 1. So we'll say third round TKO. Sadly, I think McGregor's going to go down and get put unconscious or semi-unconscious before they stop it. So that's my prediction. I hope I'm wrong on that, though. I genuinely hope McGregor wins. It's good for the sport if he wins. It's good for everybody except for Max and Max's family, but it's good for everybody else pretty much in the world if McGregor wins this fight, including me and including fight fans all over. But I hope you guys enjoyed this breakdown. Make sure you subscribe to the channel right now for more fight topics, MMA news, takes, hot takes, all that stuff. We're going to be putting out a ton of more videos in the upcoming days and weeks. So subscribe now, and hope you enjoyed the channel.